Hello everyone, this is Alex with the Shrub of Knowledge, and we are about to start our second lesson to our Intro Greek course. So, in this lesson, we are going to learn how the H sound is represented at the beginning of a Greek word. And if you remember from the last lesson, there wasn't a letter in Greek for H. Also, we're going to learn the three different kinds of accent marks. We are going to learn the difference between persistent and recessive accentuation. And you're going to learn a bunch of complicated names for stuff. So there are three kinds of accents in ancient Greek. Originally, the accent marks represented a change in pitch, not in stress. So English is a stress language. We put a bit of oomph or extra effort on the syllables that are stressed. So accent versus accent, or emphasis versus emphasis. Put the emphasis on the wrong syllable. When you say that, it sounds funny because the oomph is in the incorrect place. But go back far enough, the actual pitch changed based on the accent. So in that sense, Greek was a bit more, I don't know, like Chinese, which has tones and the pitch goes up and down. So, yeah, let's talk about the different accent marks. First, we have the acute, the oxea prosodia, or the sharp thing that you put on the ode. This originally represented an up in your pitch. So looking at this last word here, prosodia. Now that kind of sounds silly to English speakers, so in the English speaking world and pretty much everywhere, when you see an acute or other accent marks, typically it just gets a bit of stress. So I've heard that these ups and downs in pitches could have been as much as the interval of a fifth, which to me sounds pretty extreme because I speak English and that would be a lot. So I'm going to say for this course, we're just going to kind of put some stress on stuff. So he oxea prosodia. Now, the other one, another accent mark, is the grave, or the he bracea prosodia. This represented a going down in pitch or keeping the pitch the same. The grave happens when you don't want to have an acute be an acute. So there's some debate in scholarship whether it meant actually going down in pitch or keeping the pitch the same and not making it an acute. But it's kind of the not acute accent. Third is a combination of the two, the circumflex. And there are various terms for these. There's the accent, the prosodia, which is perispomene, which means a wheeling or a drawing around. But you also have perispasmos, and sort of more indicative of what's going on, oxubaris, the sharp flat, the up down, the acute grave. So the circumflex is a combination of the acute and the grave. So it's a going up and then down in pitch. And because you're doing two things in the same syllable, these circumflexes only happen on long syllables, because with a short syllable you don't have enough time to do both an acute and a grave. You don't have enough time to do a oxubaris. In addition to our three accent marks, or pitch marks, we have two breathing marks. And this tells us to H or not to H. There's a rough breathing mark and a smooth breathing mark. With rough, you get an H, and with smooth, no H. An important note is in words initial upsilon and rho always get the rough breathing. And I'll tell you why this always is in quotes in a second. The rough breathing here, you see sort of a C shape on top of the letter. And this is, hey, the seya prosodia, or the rough or the hairy thing. And smooth breathing, which kind of looks like a C but backwards. It's just pile, or plain. There's no added H roughness. And I wanted to wait to tell you why always was in those quotes there, because think of the letters in Greek, upsilon and epsilon. Well, upsilon is kind of a word which starts with an upsilon and doesn't have a rough breathing. Upsilon just meaning the plain I sound. But normal words in Greek, I'll give you an example, hypnos for sleep, that has a rough breathing. So with the exception of the name of the letter upsilon itself, yeah, initial upsilon gets a rough breathing. There are a couple of other marks to be aware of. First is the diaresis, and it kind of looks like a German umlaut. It's the double dot here above the iota. Diaresis literally means a tearing or taking apart. And it's called this because you're taking apart what would be a diphthong. So this word here, paleiadio, that iota is not pronounced with the previous eta. Some publishers will actually not write iota subscripts as subscripts, they'll write them to the right of whatever vowel they go with. But this word, which is actually from the first line of the Iliad, this word having a diaresis tells us the eta and the iota are pronounced differently. You also have a coronus, which is this curved mark above the upsilon in tauta. So in ta auta, to the left, it means the same things, and the curved mark above the upsilon just indicates smooth breathing. The word doesn't sound like hauta, it's just auta. But when they allied together, because it rolls off the tongue a lot better, well, tauta starts with a consonant, so this mark above the upsilon is not a smooth breathing mark. It is a coronus, indicating that it is the result of crosses, or a mixing or blending, when these two words combine or allied into one. Next, syllable names. The last syllable is called the ultima, second to last, penult, and before that, the antepenult. Ultima comes from Latin, means last. Penult comes from paine, if you use classical pronunciation, or paine, ultima. So you've heard the term penultimate, almost last, second to last. Think of the word peninsula in English. Paine, insula, an almost island. So a penult, or penultima, is the almost last. And then antepenult, what does ante mean? I don't know, think of the antebellum period in the American South, the before the war period in the South. Antepenult, it's the before the almost last syllable, therefore it is the third to last syllable. So, the acute accent is on any of these three syllables. The circumflex is on either the ultima or the penult, that is, either the last syllable or the second to last syllable. And the grave is only on the last syllable, the ultima. With circumflex not being on the third to last syllable, there's not enough time to get it back that far. Greek tends to want the accent stuff to be at the end of a word. So the first of our three accent marks, or pitch accent marks, is the acute. originally represented a rise in pitch. Now it's just stress. It can stand on the ultima, the penult, or the antepenult, so any of the three last syllables. And pretty much it can only be on the antepenult when the ultima is short. And we'll address exceptions as they come. So there's the circumflex, originally rise and fall in pitch. Because two things are going on, it needs to be on a long syllable, because you need to have enough time to actually go up and down in pitch on the same syllable. And this accent mark can only be on the ultima and the penult. Lastly, we have the grave. Originally it represented a fall in pitch, or at least not a rise in pitch. And it replaces the acute on an ultima when the word which has the ultimate acute is followed immediately by another word which is not an enclitic. And for now, let's just say that an enclitic is a special word which affects the accentuation of the word before it. So this is my favorite paragraph of all of Chase and Phillip's, and so I figured I would just share it. A word beginning with the acute upon the ultima is known as an oxytone. One with the acute upon the penult as a paroxytone. One with the acute on the antepenult as a proparoxytone. One which bears circumflex upon the ultima is called a properispomenon. One with the circumflex upon the penult is a properispomenon. These terms, though formidable, will save much laborious periphrasis. Now, the phrase laborious periphrasis is itself laborious periphrasis, but Chase and Phillips have a point. I will be using these terms because it'll save me the effort of saying circumflex on the second to last syllable when I can just say properispomenon. But they are right, these terms are formidable. So, I think it'll help to actually explain what they mean. Oxy, you remember one of the terms for a circumflex was oxuberis, a sharp flat. So an acute goes up, it's sharp. So an oxytone, let's just say, we'll say the tone starts at the end. Oxytone, sharp at the end. A paroxytone, para, next to. So the syllable which is next to the last syllable, or the penult, being oxy, being sharp, so paroxytone. And proparoxytone, the syllable before the syllable which is next to the last syllable, which is the antepenult, that being sharp itself, proparoxytone. Now let's look at properispomenon. If you remember, a couple of our words for circumflex were perispasmos and perispomene. Well, perispamenon just having a circumflex on the last syllable and pro before that last syllable, which in this case would be the penult. Properispomenon having the dragging around before, that is before the last syllable. So, I just love this paragraph, and these terms, though formidable, will indeed save much laborious periphrasis. So, the rules. If the ultima is long, you can't accent the antepenult. We said there were a couple of exceptions to this, and we'll get into that soon, but there's just sort of too much going on at the end there. There's too much time spent at the end to have an accent that far back. Nouns, adjectives, and non-finite verbs, they have what we call a persistent accent. So for nouns and adjectives, and this includes pronouns, and non-finite verb forms, so the infinitives and the participle, you have to just sort of memorize which syllable gets the accent. And then based on changing endings, you change the position of this accent or the quality, like whether it's an acute or circumflex, only because you have to. But finite verb forms are much nicer. You try to move the accent back as far as you can. And this is determined by how long the last syllable is, pretty much. And what I'm going to say is you'll just eventually learn this from practice. But I'd say at least learn the rule, and you'll get some practice shortly. If a long penult is accented, a long ultima means it has to be an acute, but a short ultima means this accented long penult has to be a circumflex. Just to say that again, if your penult gets the accent, the fact that the ultima is long means your penult is an acute, so you have a paroxytone. But if your ultima is short and you want to put the accent on the penult, well, your word is a properispomenon. Let's go through a few examples. We have the word for man, anthropos. Maybe your sister studied anthropology, I don't know. But anthropos, it's a noun. We just have to memorize this word wants to have its accent on the antepenult. So, what happens if we change the ending a little bit? We make this word of men, not just man. So of men, the ending changes from a short omicron, a small literally omicron. We change it to a big O, an omega, mega O. Mega O is long, omega is long. So because the ending has been lengthened, we remember one of our rules. The accent can't be on the antepenult when the ultima is long, so we move it forward. So, let's look at another rule. Our penult is getting the accent, and it's a long penult. Do we want an acute or do we want a circumflex? Well, the ultima is long, so we want our penult to be an acute, a paroxytone. Now, here's an exception. Anthropoi is a proparoxytone, but the ultima is a diphthong, and diphthongs are long. Well, this is one of the exceptions for these kinds of forms of anthropoi, these ois and these i's at the end of a lot of nouns, which make it them plural, and we'll get into the specifics in later chapters. For accentuation purposes, ending ois and i's will be short. Here's another word, doron. The accent is on the penult, and our penult is long. Now we have to decide to circumflex or not to circumflex. So we ask the question, is our ultima long or short? Well, our ultima is an omicron, which is always short. Therefore, doron, because it has a long penult which gets the accent and its ultima is short, because of this, we know that doron is a properispomenon. Change it up a little bit. We say of gifts. Notice how we changed the ending to omega nu, just like we did with anthropon, of gifts, of plus the plural form of a word. Because we have now made our ultima long by switching out that short syllable with the necessarily long syllable, looking at our rule, even though our penult is a long syllable, it still gets the acute. Now on to your homework. This is a course. You'll learn by doing, so here's what you got to do. Learn all this stuff. Even though there's a bunch of fancy Greek words, in this particular case, I think that they're all very useful because they allow you to be precise in these little matters, which will only be beneficial in the long run. Especially learn the rules for where accents can go, even if you don't learn something like properispomenon, which I think you should. I really like to emphasize accentuation rules because they allow you to notice distinctions that you wouldn't if you just ignored accents all the times. Most programs, I think, ignore accents or just don't place nearly enough emphasis on them. And I was very lucky that when I was doing Intro Greek, my instructor was very particular about accents, and I'm very grateful for that. There are some exercises for this chapter which I'd encourage you to do, and if you want some help, email me or contact me. Look at the next chapter, chapter 3, and do the reading as best you can based on what you learned in the chapter. So give the chapter a look first, and then watch next chapter's video. Thank you for watching this Intro Greek video. Like and subscribe to this channel, Shrub of Knowledge. Find the Facebook page, give that a like. I'm going to say leave a comment on this video of which words you didn't know. And even if you did know all the words, if you knew what properispomenon was or properoxetone, leave a comment to, I don't know, show off. Yeah, thanks. Bye-bye.